Chekrin, has hemophilia, and I've been married to Peter for 26 years.
When did you first realize that you were involved with some of the bleeding disorder?
Very early on, actually, in our courtship. We met through sign language classes, and so we had decided that we were, through our friendship, in order to learn sign language, we weren't going to speak to each other than with our hands. And funnily enough, that made communicating so much easier because we never had to speak words. So I learned about Peter's background in terms of having hemophilia, and we were able to discuss a lot of issues that might have been awkward otherwise, so kind of interesting.
And so when he told you he had a bleeding disorder, what were some of the questions that you had, or what were some of the reactions?
Well, my reaction was, wow, how the world comes in full circle. I grew up on a street with a couple of boys who had hemophilia. And at that time, it was very guarded, and they were very closed about the condition. And we didn't find out that it was actually hemophilia until a number of years later. But they would disappear, and we had to be careful in terms of play. And so I had actually been around and good friends with folks for a long time before I met Peter. So it really was about, what have I learned in my lifetime that I need to relearn?
So that's a good question. What had you learned that you needed to relearn?
Well, already at that point, there were concerns, of course, about HIV and HCV, and that had something to do with the information being protected. So when Peter and I first got involved, he didn't have awareness that he had HCV, but had communicated to me that he had neither HIV nor HCV, and I was familiar with sort of the issues of the day with hemophilia. And those were probably the biggest issues because I played so much with the other boys. I had known that, the rest of it was all livable and all possible. So those were our biggest concerns. Of course, at the time when we did, we got married, and then we didn't learn until I was 8.5 months pregnant that Peter did indeed have HCV. And so at that point, that was, that was probably a bit of I would say that was our most challenging time because we had entered into an agreement and thinking we had all the information, both of us, and we would have made the same choices that we did regardless, because you learn that about yourself as time goes on. But I think that was a challenge for us.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that challenge?
Well, I would say that there were, reflecting back now, I can see all of the benefits. At the time, it was hard to see the benefits because, again, we were finding out at a time when we were expecting our first baby, and we were 2 weeks away, and I didn't know if I would also test positive, if baby would test positive. So it was a very stressful time in our lives. And then, and the reasoning we were given that Peter was never told was that because there was no treatment at the time, they felt that it would be better that we didn't have that information, because then we would just be anxious knowing and not having a treatment. So they did, the information was shared once they knew there was a treatment. So after the baby was born, Peter right away started treatment. And it, was a tough time. It was definitely tough to start, sort of, you're in a new marriage, you're starting a new family, and, you're dealing with illness. And where I see the positives today is that we learned a lot about each other. We learned about our strengths. We've learned how strong we are. Peter came through things very well. He was able to clear the virus. We were amongst probably the most fortunate in that he was able to complete his treatments without being really sick. He lost 30 pounds, but he really, compared to many, he was very fortunate in that he was able to complete. Later on in life, our children, one is studying medicine, and the other one is interested in pursuing medicine as well. And both boys, I would say, have benefited from that experience. Both received significant scholarships, and a lot of it related to our family story. And I think so. They've really, if someone would have told me that what felt like a really, challenging start would have ended up in something so positive almost 25 years later, then I probably would have laughed at them at the time, because there was a 10-year, we ended up, there was a 10-year process with compensation where we didn't have, they couldn't find the records to prove. So we had to go through a real legal process to really show that the system wasn't infallible, and where some of the issues were in the system, and it took a full 10 years to do that. But Peter was very determined that information needed to come to light, and that it shouldn't happen again. And in order to build that relationship of trust with our caregivers, we needed to establish that, that practice just was not okay. So, yeah, we're happy to be on this side, and I'm glad that, that last appearance, in court, and I was glad for the support. We definitely did have the support of our nursing team in that process, and we're very, very grateful to those folks. And we're hopefully a little bit wiser. We're definitely healthy, and we're very grateful for the medical system that we've got in Canada, despite the fact that it's not perfect. It's really good.
Is there anything else that you have on your mind that you were itching to tell folks who might be in the same position that you are someday, or?
I would say certainly reaching out to the society, finding folks with a common experience will lead to some of the best friendships that you're probably ever going to have. I would say to folks, persevere in your advocacy, and don't become discouraged when time after time you run into the same experiences, because I keep saying to Peter, okay, every person, every resident, someday that could be our son, for one. Secondly, every person that we are educating will never again enter into a situation with someone with a bleeding disorder and make the assumptions that they may have made, which may have led to negative outcomes for us, will hopefully improve the outcome for someone else. So, never give up.